Today's episode is brought to you by 2AT Fitness and the Brew Bar. Mike and Tom are washing their mouths out with soap because the Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language. Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the Tremors edition. My name is Michael Shantz. I'm from the How Dare You Awards. With me is the master himself, Tom Stewart from Lonesome Whistle Productions. Give it to me, Tom.
You mean they've been acting so smart because they're so stupid?
Great.
We've talked before about retconning in sequels. I don't think I've ever encountered a retcon of a retcon that is in the same movie.
Yeah, right.
This Aftershocks is working on a seriously meta level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are, of course, everyone, talking about the 1996 sequel, Tremors 2 Aftershocks, directed by S.S. Wilson, who will appear again. This movie had a budget of $4 million, but was, of course, released direct-to-video, Tom. Can we talk about S.S. Wilson for a second?
The ship or the person?
The person.
Okay. The S.S. Wilson is the ship that rescued Tom Hanks in Castaway, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Little non-sequel humor there for you. That's a rarity, isn't it?
Who can't appreciate a good Castaway joke?
Although, let's face it, we could click on Castaway now and probably find out there's a video sequel to that.
Well, and that's the amazing thing about these sequels. When you look at the directors, not the director of this movie, but down the line, there's a director who is like a professional sequel director.
Yes, and if you open up his IMDb and you will learn that there are movies that have sequels that you did not know had sequels.
No idea had sequels. Exactly. I was surprised like 7 times in a span of 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, I said, "Wow, no, what, really?"
Which kind of dashes the theory that there are no auteurs in the world of VOD.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are people who express their art solely through video sequels.
Right.
And more power to them.
Yeah. Go nuts.
Can't imagine it's easy.
You want to know what this guy's fingerprints are on? S.S. Wilson?
Go for it. I didn't check into this.
I believe as a writer, though.
Okay.
As a writer, we've got Wild Wild West.
Oh.
Short Circuit.
Okay,
Short
good.
Circuit 2.
Not so good.
Heart and Soul. I think that was that Robert Downey Jr. movie, wasn't it?
No idea.
Yeah.
If it doesn't have if it doesn't have a 2 in it or a number in the title, I ain't interested.
You don't care. And finally, Ghost Dad.
Oh.
Starring everybody's least favorite piece of shit dad.
That movie I don't know what the movie equivalent of pulping a book is.
Right.
But a movie in which Bill Cosby is able to get into your home and hover over your bed has got to be confined to the trash bin of movie history. Along with that Jerry Lewis Holocaust clown movie.
Absolutely. So, yeah, S.S. Wilson.
Wow, okay.
Now, we both rank this towards the bottom.
Yeah, I think this
Are we both second to last?
No, I put this above Bloodline, so this is
That's right.
Kind of coming out of the bottom of the middle for me.
Right.
It's like a baseball commentary. Coming out of the middle.
So we have 6 sequels, correct?
Yes. So this is fourth for me, fifth for you, right?
For you, fifth for me, right? Okay. And
that may be wrong, everyone. We've not written any of this down.
And then, for the sake of argument, for the sake of our podcast, we said that you would declare this movie good and I would declare it bad.
I've got enough to call it a good movie. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm right there, but I'm like just under.
Yeah.
All right.
I certainly like this more than Bloodlines.
I love Bloodlines.
Good for you. More power to you.
You know, well, okay, I'll save it for
Let's talk about
Tremors 2 Aftershocks. Now, this movie is an outlier from the entire rest of the series because it is the only movie in the entire series that brings back a character other than Bert.
No, Back to Perfection has some original cast members in.
Yeah, that's true. But I guess I was thinking of our lead actors. Yeah,
definitely. I have to say,
I love me some Fred Ward. Don't get me wrong.
I did not like me some Fred Ward in this.
Really?
I think my problems with this movie, I realize I'm supposed to be arguing for it as a good movie.
And I'm here telling you what I like.
Yeah, but you brought it up, so I got to go there. I think this is before the realization that, we should have Burt Gummer carrying these movies. And Fred Ward...
I would completely agree with that.
But he looks a little lost, both acting-wise, and they write the character almost the way I imagine Fred Ward feels about doing this role, which is ambivalent.
Well, but that's the other thing about this movie. I don't know that that's necessarily and completely his fault because of what they do with the script.
Yeah, I mean, there
is not as much danger in this movie as there are in all the other movies.
We've talked before about this kind of mode of address that sequels have that's kind of unlike any other kind of filmmaking, where you are simultaneously doing something in world, but you're also talking to the audience about what's going on behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
So the first 10 or 15 minutes of Fred Ward in this movie is a kind of fictionalized version of what happened when the producers asked him to do the sequel. with what are, I imagine, exactly the same conversations. About, did you make enough money from the first film that could really ensure your financial security?
Do you need to pay for a new roof? Yes. If you need a new roof, you could do Tremors 2 Aftershocks for us.
You didn't save all your money from Tremors, so now you need to do this. And
I don't think they're gonna actually make the sequel to Remo Williams. So why don't you do Tremors 2 Aftershocks?
Quite. And I guess my other big issue is his acting is locked in Tremors, the original Tremors, and that was a very...
That's interesting, yeah.
That was a very, as I saw it, a very overt B-movie style of acting, which, ironically, this is more of a B-movie than Tremors was.
Right,
It's not the case here, and I think he looks a little bit out of sync with everyone else acting-wise. I think he's still pushing that melodrama that no one else is that interested in anymore.
Right. Well,
but I mean,
speaking to the whole series, that's the one thing I love about Michael Gross is just in the pocket for these movies every single time.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, completely. He does a tone read on every movie and he nails it. And
right.
I suppose, I mean, he's not the biggest problem with the two leads in this movie, but I still think, he has a huge burden to carry because this movie's not making any bones that Kevin Bacon didn't want to come back.
Right.
This movie is putting it out there.
It's announcing
Kevin Bacon
it loudly
did not want to do this movie. It is said so many times, directly and indirectly, Kevin Bacon did nothing want to do with this.
Well, now, but here's the funny thing about that, because I mean, I have notes that several times throughout the series, Kevin Bacon did consider coming back, but something would come up, another role, or there was always something in the way, or. But you might be right. There might be another note where he just thought, no, not right now, not this time, where he did just decide not to do it. But he was interested.
We get the thing that we always get where the person who's not in the movie, someone looks at a photograph of them. Mm-hmm. It's happened in literally every sequel we've looked at. So there's a newspaper article with a photo of Kevin Bacon, so we looked at that.
There's also that sort of framed People magazine on the wall.
Yes.
It was a lovely touch.
We introduced Grady, who is the sequel trying to have it both ways. You want an entirely new character, but he's a character who knows everything about what happened in the first movie.
Right.
So he works both ways. He can tell he's de facto like having a character from the original movie, but he's an entirely new character because he knows everything about what happened in the first movie. He studied it obsessively.
Exactly.
So that's a kind of...
He is part of the reason...
But he's constantly referring to the fact that he's not Kevin Bacon.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing.
At one point he
is a poor man's Kevin Bacon. I mean, he is a poor substitute. And that's one of the reasons I don't like this. This movie doesn't rise to the level of the other ones for me. Is almost like his performance. I mean, he's bad.
It's a really bad performance. And I think just... it's partly because I don't think he's a great actor, but again I think it's about the burden of, along with Fred Ward, it's about the burden of circumstances on them. Fred Ward has to deal with the fact that he's carrying this movie on his own. Kevin Bacon's not there, so you don't have that chemistry. With Grady, he's trying to justify himself as an entirely new character when all he does is recap the first movie.
Yeah.
So that's a really hard position for an actor to be in. And there's lines in there that, literally says, "I'm not the other guy."
Yeah, exactly.
He says to people, "I'm not Kevin Bacon.
Right.
I know I'm doing everything that you'd think Kevin Bacon would do,
but I'm not him.
In the sequel of this movie, but I'm not him." So that's hard. And I think by the end of the movie, just, again, devil's advocate, that I sort of like the idea that he was, he feels bad about getting Earl into all this again. Like, Earl was home and dry, and now he's back fighting Tremors and nearly dies. And at one point he says, "It's all my fault you're here." And I thought that was a reasonable attempt to try and give him an arc, but it's very thin.
Well, that's pretty thin, yeah.
It's thin, but it's kind of, it's there.
But we spoke in the rankings, spoke in the ranking episode about our affinity for the writing and the attempt to give genuine arcs throughout the movie. But in this movie is, I think, the weakest in that attempt.
It is. I like. First of all, I like how much romance there is in all these movies.
Mm-hmm.
I think that really. I don't know why it struck me this time watching it. I was like, there's a romantic thread through all these movies, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And it puts a
There's
really
a
nice
moment in this
on
one.
Every movie.
There's a moment in this one that I really like where Fred Ward as Earl, what's her name? Kate Riley, played by Helen Shaver.
Mm-hmm. Who, again, seems like she might have been in Tremors, but she won't in Tremors.
Right, exactly. But he walks by her, and you have this moment where he checks out her ass. And you think, come on, get your act together, Tremors.
Yeah.
But then the great part is that then there's a moment he walks by her, and she checks out his ass.
Yeah.
And I loved that moment where they were giving equal consideration to both men and women just being able to check out each other's asses.
Yeah, it's it's not just the woman being objectified, and that's really nice.
Right, exactly.
It's also, I mean, we've talked on this podcast about carbon dating as well, like,
Sure.
and I feel like this is and they June Diane Raphael's always talking about this on How Did This Get Made, not to plug one of our rivals, but the era of buns, like bun love,
Yeah.
like movies where the money shot was a guy's butt in jeans,
Checking out that ass.
And now women now are like, why? Like, what's sexy about this? So it's I love that it's in that moment, but I also love that it reverses the gaze, and it also provides us with one of the first irreconcilable coincidence of this series, which is that Kate turns out to be the playmate who is on
that's on his wall,
back in Nevada. Which again, this is the only stuff that happens in sequels. These people meet under the strangest circumstances,
right?
But the way that their romance winds up is lovely. I thought that was a great. In retrospect, it looks like a great way to move Earl out of the series.
Right.
At the time, I didn't look up anything about these movies as I was watching them because I wanted to be surprised and going fresh every time. So I didn't know whether Earl was going to make it into Back to Perfection. So I thought, but either way it works. I'm like, either this is setting us up for the next movie, great, or it's a good way to send him off into the sunset with his
lady friend. Yeah.
So they do a good job of working Earl out of the movie, but they don't do a good job of putting him into the movie.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, and that's one of my first notes was. I mean, so first of all, this movie. My very first note is I thought it was hysterical that this movie included credits, and then told you where they were, the location in Mexico.
Yeah.
But then had more credits after that. A strange choice. And then, of course, you have the requisite death, a worker at what I can't even remember what scientific field. What are they doing there? Is it an oil?
Isn't it oil?
Oil,
isn't it an oil?
Right?
Yeah, I think it's oil.
So it's oil, and then this guy that owns the oil field goes to find Fred Ward. He goes to find Earl. He doesn't contact military or ex-military. He finds this guy.
That's explained within the movie. These guys are These guys are like celebrities now.
Right.
These are the guys. We balked at another stakeout. And how that was like, there's no such thing as a stakeout specialist. But in the world of Tremors, there's definitely Tremors specialists, and there's these two guys. And now Grady,
if you look at that first movie, I don't think by the end of it you'd call them experts.
Yeah, and it's not. It's not great. I also was a little bit conflicted about seeing the tremor so quickly into the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm already calling it a tremor, which is something that this series makes fun of constantly. We're getting the name wrong. Graboid,
yeah.
We see a graboid very early on in the movie, and initially I was like, okay, I'd rather, I'd like a little bit of a tease, a little bit of foreplay before we actually see it. But then I was like, but fuck, it looks good. The prosthetics are on point.
Yeah, totally.
So I guess if you're like a video director, it's like, look at how good this looks. I want it in the first minute of the movie.
Right.
So I understand that choice, although it is not the choice I would have made.
Well, and here's the thing, it's kind of like the Jaws 2.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah. We made the point that shark's fucking everywhere in Jaws 2, and the graboids, they're fucking everywhere in this movie.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's take a break.
Okay.
We're just getting into it, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about Tremors 2, the 1996 film. We're going to take a break, and when we get back, we'll discuss how easy these things are to kill suddenly.
But difficult to capture.
Heard.
That's the trade-off.
All right, we'll be back right after this. Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. And we're back. Tom and I are here discussing Tremors 2 Aftershocks, directed by S.S. Wilson. So let me ask you this. Did it surprise you, and did you like that they go to Mexico and all of a sudden it's very easy to kill graboids? You just need Tonka trucks?
It certainly surprised me.
And bombs?
Yeah, I thought it sort of somewhat diminished the threat of the graboid.
Yeah, I thought so too.
But it's a prelude.
They were also going for more comedy in this movie than they were in the first movie, I think. And they had sort of, even though this movie is 1996, they had a full-on 1980s music montage of blowing up graboids it went on for a while. It was like more than 5 full minutes of just blowing up graboids.
For some of us, the 80s never died when it comes to montage.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in retrospect, I mean, at the time I thought exactly the same thing. I was like, it's relatively easy to kill these monsters who were seemingly so difficult to kill at one point. But then I thought, well, that's an overture to to basically retconning the graboid as the cocoon stage of the monster.
So, and that's the next big thing about this movie is we are not done learning about these creatures. They will evolve. Yeah. And that I love. I love that they take 3 full movies to explain to you the evolution of these creatures. I think that's brilliant. Yeah,
they there's a lot of this is a movie that's very much finding out. And this is a sequel trope of like we're digging. This is what they do in the Candyman sequels. It's sort of like, well, Candyman scared the fuck out of us, but who is he? And this is what we're kind of doing on a biological level with the Tremors here. At one point, I was very interested at how much time they spent in the movie debunking the idea that they might be aliens. And my first thought was, someone's seen Highlander 2: The Quickening and said, we are not making that mistake.
We're not doing that shit.
At one point, someone, I don't know, I think it's Grady, says, they're from Earth, right? It's like looking out into the audience going, we're not going to throw that they're aliens shit.
We're not going to do that alien shit, correct?
And it's great. We have a lot of discussion about how they're changing, how they're evolving. We also get the notion, which sets us up beautifully for later movies, that the whole time these creatures are going to be changing. And this is where Burt Gummer becomes very important. He's just like, it's always different. Every time you encounter them, they're different.
Right.
And that's basically his whole job in this movie, is to say that to us.
Yeah. And he says it through maybe my favorite line in the entire movie when he says, I have been denied critical, need to know information.
Yes.
It's so good.
And it's very, I was surprised about how self-conscious and meta it all was. At one point, I think Grady, who becomes the mythology monitor of the movie.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, if he says it, if he asks the question and gets the answer, then it's canon, basically. He says, "This is important, isn't it? Science has never determined their origin." So it's very, but when you get to a point where even the screenwriters get sick of having to answer questions about the backstory of the Tremors, and it just ends up with Grady asks a question and Earl says, "Shut up, we're not talking about that now."
Yeah, right.
Just refuses to answer fundamental questions that the screenwriters don't have an answer for.
Are not prepared to discuss. Exactly.
Yeah. And we also, speaking, you know, of like other sequels that are woven into here, we also get the sense that, you know, the Tremors are targeting people, which gave me that sort of Jaws 4 flavor.
Well, and not only that, but you have that moment where, what is it, the radio on the truck is attached to something. Basically, they have the barrel scene, except it's Tremors, and they're latched onto a radio that is hooked up to the truck, and it starts dragging the truck around the entire, you know, mesa.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well, like in the back of my mind, and again, I'm thinking about the historical period in which this movie is made. I think one of the things behind this desire to change the graboid from one thing into something else, which ends up being called a shrieker, is to kind of go from practical to CGI, in effect. Right. Because as soon as, you know, the shriekers are very, very overtly CGI, whereas everything to do with the graboid is puppetry.
Correct.
So, and that's, you know, there's, as I said in the previous episode, the CGI it's very early on in the development of CGI, so it doesn't look
the
good.
The effects have not,
but comparatively,
caught up with what they want to do.
Yeah, and also thematically, you know, I can't get Jurassic Park out of my mind in this movie. Like, they're reimagined as essentially dinosaurs, it seems to me.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
So there's a very, you know, they're trading off what is the hot cinematic thing of the moment, which is CGI and things looking like dinosaurs. And it's interesting, in later movies they'll make the I'm going to call it the tremor. That's going to be my umbrella term. I'm not getting it wrong. That's my umbrella term, because I'm not saying graboid, shrieker, and ass blaster every single time.
You're saying all of them.
Yeah. So, but making a tremor look like the monster movie, the movie monster of the moment, and it keeps doing this again and again and again.
Yeah.
And in this one, it's dinosaurs, and I have no problem with that. But that's
keeps
definitely
reinventing itself.
That's definitely what's going on.
Oh, absolutely. But it's funny because, you know, like we said in the ranking episode, the CGI doesn't look great for the shriekers, and yet somehow it works for the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
you know.
Yeah, as I said, I don't think it's any better or worse than you know, Jar Jar Binks looks in Phantom Menace. But that's supposed to be like that's a couple of years later, but that's supposed to be like the pinnacle of CGI and the most resources and expense we've spent on it. And the differences between that and this is negligible.
Agreed, completely.
What's the big deal? I think it just, the fall off, because the practical is so good, the prosthetics are so amazing. That's the fall off, and that's where it becomes disappointing. But
and I was just gonna say the same thing, that because the practical effects in the first movie, and in extent this movie as well, because we see the graboids. Yeah, it's great, and because it's so good, it's, you know, it's disappointing.
Yeah.
But not on a grand scale. I equate it to sort of like the waves in a perfect storm.
You're talking
people might
about the
have
movie
thought-
here, not just. This is not some grand metaphor. This is the.
No, yes, exactly. I'm talking about the actual movie. Where at the time people are like, that's going to look so amazing. But it doesn't really. Like you said, we were at the beginning of this technology.
Mhm.
And, they wanted to do things that the technology was just out of reach of the technology
Absolutely.
at the time.
Um,
So there are important steps. Like Jar Jar Binks is an important step in the sense of he looks terrible, but he gave way to the things that Cameron did in Avatar.
or everything Andy Serkis does every time he acts.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we should be generous. And also, what this movie, like you said, it runs with practical effects for a good chunk of this movie. It's also got the filmmaking sense to sometimes verbally describe what happened rather than showing it. And one of my favorite scenes in this is Burt Gummer recounting what happened to him.
Yeah.
Without
right,
the
yeah.
use of special effects. Just
Right.
and you get it, that they do the same thing in Back to Perfection when the doctor tells you like this awful thing that's happened.
The awful thing.
And you
that
just
happened.
get to
Yeah, right.
imagine it, and I'm like, well, they're not. And that to me is more, when George Lucas makes the Phantom Menace, he's putting his entire pot into digital effects. These directors have the sense to say, if this bit doesn't work, it doesn't matter because look, we've got practical effects for another 20 minutes. We've got Burt Gummer telling the story of what happened, which is exciting in and of itself. It's not going to kill this movie if some of the graboids look like, outtakes from the raptor scene in Jurassic Park, It's not going to kill us. Because, and that's the thing, it's like the ability to, this is what I mean about filmmaking aptitude that's throughout all of these movies. Like they can put things in perspective. They whether it's writing or visual or character, they can control those different factors, those different genres and tones really fucking well.
Really well. And that's the thing to me about these movies is, I mean, you can't think of a movie that had a blank check more than the Star Wars prequels, right?
Right.
And this is a B movie made by what people might consider to be, a B movie director, maybe even B movie actors.
Mm-hmm.
But working within those confines, they create something that works.
Yeah.
And with a blank check, those prequels, the Star Wars prequels, for me, created something that didn't work.
Yeah,
There's very little I like in the prequels.
Or definitely something much less satisfying.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that's
much
the thing.
Much more overambitious and a risk that didn't pay off.
Yeah, exactly.
I suppose here the risks are minimal, but that just makes it even more remarkable that they're such high quality so much of the time.
Right. Yeah.
That said, no, I don't really have it. I don't really have anything that. I mean, are we at the point where we can talk about the longest detonation fuse in cinema history, or have we still got stuff to talk about? Probably still got stuff to talk about, right?
Yeah, I mean,
that's a little preview, everyone.
I don't care when and where we talk about it, but you're right about that. This movie is an outlier to me in the sense of, because we're kind of alluding to things on the whole for the series.
Mm-hmm.
And in this particular movie, if you've got the scales of good, bad, justice out,
yes.
there's a pebble or two more on the bad for me. And
Agreed.
a lot of that weight I give to the character of Grady. I really don't like that actor.
Yeah, he's definitely the weakest element of this movie.
Yeah.
But again, he has to wear so many hats, both literally and figuratively, in this movie. In this movie, that he can never become not even a fully realized character, a realized character. So he's got too much of the weight of exposition and backstory on him. And then halfway through the movie, they dump monitoring the mythology on him.
Right.
But he is the most anonymous of the. Well, I mean, it didn't start off as a sidekick, but I mean, every co-lead ends up being Burt Gummer's sidekick.
Right.
And that's another. I mean, because that's a sort of structural change they don't acknowledge. They kind of want to put the peg in the Kevin Bacon peg in the hole with this movie with Grady, but the problem is Earl was in that hole. It wasn't Kevin Bacon's hole; it was Earl's hole.
Yeah, exactly.
Now Earl's off to the side, and they're putting a Grady-shaped peg in the Kevin Bacon hole. In Earl's hole.
In Earl's hole.
This metaphor is getting out of control.
It does not fit, right?
Basically, what I'm saying is there's pegs in holes where there shouldn't be pegs in holes. So
here, there, and everywhere, there's round pegs, there's square holes. There's square holes, there's round pegs.
And narratively, that compromises what Fred Ward can achieve as an actor, because then he's got to be Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward, while also being Kevin Bacon to Grady's Earl. It was just a bad idea. What is kind of, I mean, we'll talk about this in the next episode, but what is kind of remarkable is and one of the reasons I love Back to Perfection is precisely because somehow it solves all of these problems almost immediately by just bumping Michael Gross up in the pecking order
to the top.
That's I mean, here it's there's something short-sighted about how they use Burt Gummer in this movie.
Well, that's the point I was just gonna make, because earlier in the episode I referenced that I like me some Fred Ward, but I was talking more generally.
Me too.
So, I mean, I love Fred Ward as an actor.
Yeah.
But he does, to what you were just saying, it feels as though he does not fit into this universe anymore because Burt is the guy. And they didn't figure that out until movie 3, but...
Because here they want him to play the role of the eccentric.
Mm-hmm.
And... I don't know. It's hard to imagine after the rest of the movies, but I don't know if Michael Gross had a scheduling conflict. It seems like this man doesn't have a lot of scheduling conflicts. Not because he's not good, but because he's fucking in all of these movies all of the time.
Right.
But here he's in his own little pocket of the movie, which is normally what you do when an actor doesn't want to come back. And you say, okay, you won't have to film with anyone, and we can do this all in a day. That was my feeling as I was watching it, which is why it was baffling that for the rest of the series he is the head honcho every single time.
Yeah, right.
So it can't be that. So maybe it's the screenwriters who they just don't understand that he. They
didn't understand the gold they had.
Yeah, they didn't understand that he can carry this movie better than Earl on his own can.
Right.
And it's just kind of it's sort of it's interesting to see the limits of what Burt Gummer does in this movie compared to the other movies.
Mm-hmm.
He's the crazy uncle basically of this movie. He's the Uncle Eddie.
I was going to say the Uncle Fester.
He's everyone's uncle. He just pops in, he says something crazy, he does something crazy, and he goes back to his little place. Right. And that's exactly the wrong use of him.
Yeah.
Especially
but they get it right in the third movie, and then we take off from there for sure.
Yeah. But kudos for figuring that out eventually. But also, like it's in this movie where not a lot is working in terms of acting and chemistry. To have Burt Gummer there as a palate cleanser is excellent.
Is wonderful. Yeah, you're right about that. All right, let's take another break, and then when we come back, we'll get to your fuse.
We are confused.
We'll be back right after this.
If you're anything like me, you spend the majority of the day wondering whether you want coffee, beer, or wine. Whichever way you fall, Brew Bar has you covered. Located in the heart of 3rd Avenue Village in glorious downtown Chula Vista, California, which is also my neck of the woods, Brew Bar is a coffee shop, bar, and eatery rolled into one delightful package. Tim and Alex run the place, and let me tell you, listeners, these guys know their coffee. And after you've been in their company, so will you. They turned me on to pour over, and it's literally all I drink now. If for some crazy reason you don't want to try the best coffee in the world, they've got espresso drinks, all kinds of teas, and even coffee cocktails. You heard me? Coffee tails. And we're just getting started. Bottle service on craft beer and wine, alcoholic and caffeinated potions, an all-day food menu with plenty of vegan options. All served up in an atmosphere hip enough to know you're getting the best quality, but not too hip that you feel the need to drive to 7-Eleven and get a bucket of brown swill. Brew Bar. It's the best place to be for beer, wine, coffee, and tea. And if you go, you might even see me.
And we're back. Tom and I are here finishing up talking about Tremors 2 Aftershocks, the 1996 film. So, I know we said when we were going into the break, Tom, that we were going to get to your fuse, but just generally, I'd like to talk about, the last 30 or so minutes of this movie, because that's when this movie, to me, starts really finding its own and getting interesting and good.
Yeah, I think, we get the pay...
Once the shriekers appear and, all of that starts happening.
We also, this is something we talked about again, these overt setups for how we're going to get out of the big problem. And with this, it's Bert's package meals. And I have a note saying, this better pay off, because we have been talking about these package meals for too long. They were answering a question nobody asked. And of course, it's part of the way that well, at least at one stage of the ending, that they're destroyed.
What are they called? MREs?
Yeah.
Meals ready
so
to eat?
Things are starting to pay off. Things that we've clunkily set up are starting to go somewhere.
Well, and just dramatically too. You've got a lot of creatures hanging around. For those that don't know, by the way, these creatures have infrared, so they can hook into your heat
Let's be
signature.
honest. They had infrared cameras.
Right.
And decided conveniently that shriekers can sense heat in people's bodies.
Yes.
How a door can hold them back, I do not understand, but okay.
I'm not sure of that either, but
yeah.
But you have moments of tension. You have Bert. He's got to climb into the the bucket of a bulldozer.
Yep, absolutely.
You've got Fred Ward. Earl is willing to sacrifice himself, get chased. There's just lots of exciting stuff going on.
Yeah,
and it's got that sort of classic monster movie feel finally in that moment of, because the thing that works about all monster movies, whatever it is, Jaws or whatever, is how are they going to get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
When you as the audience member are thinking to yourself, I have no idea what I would do to try to survive this moment. What are these characters going to do? that's when you start leaning in and the movie gets interesting. And I think this movie does start to achieve that towards the end of the movie.
Yes. And then then we set off a fuse to
the forever fuse, I call it. That's my note. I call it the forever fuse
to a bomb which may never go off. At one point I was like, this bomb isn't going off. Or it's gone off. It's a dud. It must have been a dud.
Even the characters.
Yeah.
Even the characters are wondering what the fuck's going on with this bomb.
And sadly, I mean, as time elapsed and the fuse was still going down, I was thinking every second more of this means that the explosion has to be exponentially more spectacular.
Bigger.
And there is just no. By the end, it says that there is no explosion that could be spectacular enough to justify this amount of time that we're waiting for it.
I agree with that, but it was a big explosion.
It was,
I'll give them that.
And you know, I like that. The final shot of the potholes, I think, is a great reveal of the impact of that. But it's a strange choice. I mean, I'm all for suspense, but there is a limit.
At the very least, to your patience.
So it's an odd ending, and it just kind of, and as you say, things are really starting to quite literally heat up. At that point in the movie, and it kind of, it sort of unravels a little bit because we're waiting for something for so long.
Well, let me ask you this, because I have a note that I can't figure out. Can you figure out this note? Shoot the car eater shot was great.
Shoot the car eater shot was great.
Is that Bert pulling out the rifle?
It sounds like Bert's...
Is there a shrieker on top of a car that he shoots?
Sure.
Listeners, call in. Let us know what the hell I wrote down.
It's a new segment of the show. What the hell are we talking about? And
it's a new segment called Understand My Notes.
I mean, you asked me if there was a shrieker on the car. I'm gonna say yes, even though I don't remember that, because there's a trapezoid of graboids, a trapeze graboid. So if that happens, I'm pretty sure at some point a shrieker was on a car.
Okay. Because I remember the shot where I think it's the first time you see Bert with like his mega rifle.
Yes.
You know? And they're rounding a corner and they see a shrieker and they duck behind the corner, and I don't know, the shrieker's just like, he's by a cinder block wall, essentially. Just a brick wall. And Bert takes the time to like put all this shit together and tells everybody to plug their ears or something. And just, I mean, I love the shot. That shot I remember because I love that he shoots the rifle and a window next to him explodes from how loud the ricochet of this rifle is. And then it just splits that shrieker in half. And that was a practical shot and great.
Absolutely.
So again, when they go to practical, it looks so good.
It does, and I think I could see that, the shriekers were kind of shot in a way that they were just cutaways. So you kind of need them to orient the audience.
They didn't need to move,
but you don't.
Right.
You're not relying on them if they really don't work. I guess they thought that it worked okay enough, but they're not essential. One of the things much earlier in the movie, one of the things I really like, which I think again is about like trying to sort of like warm people up to the idea that CGI might be a better alternative, is when you think you've seen a practical effect, but it's actually a model of the graboid. You remember that?
Yeah.
So they're obviously playing with that idea of like this is just the way things are going, and hopefully at some point, all this prosthetic stuff is gonna look like the fakest stuff ever. Hasn't happened yet.
No.
Not even in 2020 has that happened. But,
no, right? Yeah, exactly.
There's still.
Give me practical.
Also, another thing that we've talked a lot about where this movie kind of doesn't, hasn't quite found its feet yet. But there are a few things that it takes forward which are kind of interesting to me. One is, I think that Latino characters are to the Tremors series what African Americans are to horror. They get killed first. And this keeps going.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's fascinating. We are in Mexico.
It is a recurring
We are
theme.
in Mexico, but all of our characters are Caucasian. All of our leading characters are Caucasian. So they're this kind of cannon fodder in the movie, which is not good, but I just thought it was like an interesting and a kind of interesting variation on the horror theme.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. I'm curious, how do you think, because they really pull this magic trick with Burt Gummer.
Yes.
And I guess what I'm interested in is, how does say a self-confessed gun lover feel about Burt Gummer? I this is pure speculation, but I just think it's fascinating that I fell in love with this character so easily when everything about him is something that I probably wouldn't want to know in real life. A person I wouldn't want to know in real life.
Well, I mean, in this movie, he's played far more for laughs. You're far less emotionally invested in him, and then in later movies, they're less concerned about kind of discovering his humanity than having him as a kind of gag button on the scene.
But the one thing they do in this movie is, because he's married in the first movie.
That's right, yeah.
To Reba, of all people.
And they got to point out why she's not there.
Yeah, exactly.
We hear a lot about that, yeah.
Right. So it's like, I've lost my wife.
Well, you don't, no.
But what he's really worried about was the gun he loves that she took.
It's interesting. It's interesting though. It's like something that I hadn't considered is, he's more of a cardboard character in this, but at the same time, we're always he has the strongest arc. Well, not even just the arc, but he's got the strongest circumstances emotionally of any character in this. Yes. Which is interesting given how little he's in the movie and how limited what he does is. We still get that because, at the end of these movies,
it's like they had a sense of what they had. Yeah, it's like they had a sense of what they had with Burt, but weren't using it fully yet.
Yeah. And even here, and I think this has got a lot to do with, how great Michael Gross is at playing this character, but you still get... Mm-hmm. The rest of these movies are, about this kind of weighing up the good and bad of Burt Gummer. And here you get a sense it's like, he's a very credible hero, but he's also a gun-toting madman who falls and breaks things a lot. So that kind of clumsy idiots, thing is interesting because he is definitely more of a comic character in here, so you would kind of expect that. But that dynamic definitely carries on. They're definitely even in this movie, even in this limited capacity, they found this idea where it's like there's always two sides to Burt Gummer. Whenever you get him, and some of these movies are a little more on his side in terms of how he sees the world than others.
Sure, right.
I guess in this one, by the fact that he's a comic character, that the movie is explicitly not a fan of Burt Gummer's way of looking at the world. But he's the guy. But he's the guy who gets them
I would
out of
agree
trouble.
with that.
Bert knows
Sure.
his bombs. He obviously doesn't know how long the fuses are on his bombs, but still.
Bert's bombs.
Bert's bombs, the longest fuse.
Dude, that's a
The
T-shirt.
longest fuses in cinematic history.
Bert's bombs is a T-shirt.
Bert's bombs, yeah.
Get to work.
I think a range of bath salts too. Bert's bombs.
Yeah. Oh, I like it.
So make. Oh, yeah, so many possibilities.
Well, I think that's as good a place as any to end it.
Absolutely,
Bert's
yeah. We
bombs.
talked about literally every frame of this movie.
Yeah.
I don't really. There's anything more to say. Sorry to see Fred Ward go, but not sorry to see. Not sorry to see Earl go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You hit the nail on the head there. I'm sorry to see Fred Ward go, but Earl, right off into the sunset. I'll take Bert.
Earl is Fred Ward is resigned to where he should be in cinema history, which is fishing over a dead naked woman's body in Robert Altman's Shortcuts. That's how I want to remember him.
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for Tremors 2 Aftershocks. If you've got a comment, if you've got something you think we missed, please let us know. Find us on Instagram, find us on Facebook, find us on Twitter, send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com.
Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps.
Yeah, we'll respond. We need it.
I was
looking
going
to
for the
build
less
the
desperate
audience.
version of that by saying it really helps. But thank you.
We're looking to build beyond Zach, Kristen, and your wife.
The gatekeepers of media.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that's it. We'll see you next time for Tremors 3.
Back to perfection. Spoiler alert.
You got it, buddy.
It is perfection.
We'll see you next time.